Rev up your engines!
Well, the 2023 Chevy Bolt, the first quarter of 2023, set a massive sales record for GM electric vehicles. They sold 19,700 Chevy Bolts the first 3 months of 2023, and last year they only sold 358 the same period of time. Now, there's a couple things going on here. One is, last year, they said they weren't going to make the Chevy Bolts anymore. That's probably why they only sold 358. But now they're saying they're making them, and they sold a sales record of 19,700 the first quarter of 2023. Now, this tells me something else. People that are going to buy electric cars, a lot of them want a smaller car like that, right? Chevy said, we're not going to make that anymore. That's old. We're going to make these big monster ones, right? Well, guess what? Even they realize we better still make these Bolts, and they are. Because those are the ones that are selling. With the tax credit, it's 20 grand for a Bolt. Small, cheaper electric cars. That's what electric cars are good for. Give you a perfect analogy from the same company, GM. You know how many Hummers they sold? The big, giant monster, $100,000 plus EV? The electric Hummers, in the first quarter, January, February, and March of 2023, they only sold 2 of them. 2. That's it, baby. No, people aren't buying these big monster ones. They sold 2 of them, right? But they sold almost 20,000 of the Bolts, the little ones. Duh. Maybe they should make little electric cars instead of big ones. Oh, gee, what a brainstorm. I've been saying that for decades. You want to make electric cars? Make little ones. Don't make big, giant monstrosities. They're not efficient for big monsters. They cost too much. The batteries are too much. They weigh too much. A lot of people would be happy with a small electric car for driving around in the city, and that makes total sense. But, of course, back a few years ago, we're not going to make these Bolts anymore. Nah. Not enough profit, right? They want to sell real expensive vehicles, and guess what? People don't buy them. People don't have that kind of money. They're going to be forced to build smaller ones. Well, they were going to get rid of that. That doesn't make enough profit. I could see them in their board meetings. We don't want to make those Bolts. We don't make enough profit. They're too cheap, right? Let's sell them $100,000 Hummers. Well, they sold 2 of those versus almost 20,000 of the little Bolts. So maybe people will realize small electric cars are the way to go, as the way our infrastructure and how far you want to drive and what are you going to use the car for, city driving, not cross-country driving. Hey, maybe they'll wise up and realize it. But then again, it's a big corporation. They're all dead from the neck up, so maybe they won't figure that one out either. Belmos at TWC.com says, how important are disc brake shields? I got 2011 Tacoma. I replaced the front rotors, but the dust shields are kind of rotting away. Should I replace them? I got to press the hub out. What do you think? The shields are mainly to keep dirt and water from splashing on the rotors. Many people, as they get old, just leave them off, especially up north. It's thin steel, like you said, it'll rust, they'll break. Guys will just cut them off and leave them off. Now, of course, if you do leave them off, then you're going to get a little more salt and stuff in the winter. If you live in Buffalo or something, and it will eat them up fast, but it's eating them up anyway. It doesn't make all that much difference. They do add a little bit of wind to cool them better, but it's such a small amount. And it's not like you're in a racetrack and you're slamming on the brakes, stepping on the gas, slamming on the brakes on a race course. You're just driving. So yes, I had many cars and many customers over the years that had old rust buckets. We would just cut them off and leave them off. Doesn't really make all that much difference. Realize your entire car eventually, if you're up north, is going to be so rotten away that the shields are the least of your worries. If the rotors are rotten, the calipers are rotten, the ball joints are rotten, yeah, those are safety issues. But the shield, no, not really all that much. And Griff says, I just picked up a 97 Toyota Tercel, 1.5, 5-speed, 151,000 miles for $700. Any common issues? All right, well, you got a 5-speed, so that means it's a standard transmission. Those can run forever. See if it burns oil. A lot of them burn oil. If it burns oil, just keep adding oil. The reason they burn oil was they often had bad valve seals. You got to take the head off, do all the valve seals over it. It was a royal pain in the butt, very expensive. But oil's cheap. Also, maybe the spark plugs will clog up once a year. There's 4 of them. They're really easy to get to. They were okay cars. You know, they're little rust buckets if you live where it rusts. Hopefully it isn't all rusted away. If you're up north, a lot of times they'll be all rusted out. But if they aren't, they can be decent knock-around cars. You know, it's a Toyota. It was just a smaller one, and Toyota stopped making them, and then they just replaced them with Yaris's and stuff that were a little bit better made, but they're still kind of cheaply cars too, but they cost little and they got great gas mileage. They can last a really long time. For $700, what the heck? Johan92 says, I got a possible coolant leak. I got an 06 Lincoln. I noticed a small leak near where the coolant temperature sensor's at. Not too great. The coolant level hasn't really gone down at all. All right, well, then what you would have would be a seepage. Many old cars will seep, and it's probably your coolant temperature sensor because part of them are plastic, and the plastic degrades and it might seep a little. It's not reaching the ground, so what the heck? If you're curious, either have a mechanic pressure tested or you yourself can buy some coolant leak dye, UV leak dye, put it in, and then get a little UV light and look there after you're driving around a few days. And if you see the temperature sensor's glowing, that means the leak is coming from there. And you can replace the coolant temperature sensor. What the heck? I mean, you said you haven't lost any coolant, so it's just a seep. As cars get old and age, they'll often seep lots of stuff. Seep a little oil, engine oil, seep a little transmission oil, seep a little coolant. But as long as you're not losing any, what the heck? It's an old car. Dick Nixon says, I got a 2020 Civic and the lease ends in 3 months. I can buy it for 17 grand, more than I can afford. So I'm looking for $12,000 Civics, 2012, both with over 100,000 miles. Should I buy that or should I bite the bullet and buy the one I'm leasing? Bite the bullet and buy the one you're leasing. Yours is a 2020 Civic, right? And you've had it, you know, it hadn't had any problems. Well, at least you didn't say. If you haven't wrecked it or anything or flooded it, buy it. You're buying a used vehicle for 12 grand, otherwise with over 100,000 miles that are 11 years old. You have no idea what the history is. Why gamble to save yourself $4,000 or $5,000? It doesn't make any sense. Look at it in the long run. Your Civic could last for decades. You haven't had any problems with it. Buy that. Sure, it's too much for a buyout, but that's the way it goes these days. It used to be the buyouts were a lot cheaper, but now the used car market's gone, so the buyout for the lease goes. Whenever the prices go up for one, prices go up for them all. So keep the one you got and just bite the bullet and buy it. See, you should have bought it in the first place instead of leasing it. I tell people, leasing a car is the dumbest thing on earth because you pay payments the rest of your life. Now, unless you run a business where it's a tax write-off, which you don't care, if it's your personal car, it doesn't make any sense to lease a car. Diego G says, I have transmission concerns. Got an '06 Honda Civic, 1.8, 220,000 miles. I've never changed the fluid. Should I change it now? I would leave it alone. Hondas are so easy to change. There's just a drain bolt. You take it out, it goes out. Above it is a fill bolt. You fill it in there. It is so simple to do. I would do it every 30, 40,000 miles. Fluid costs almost nothing. And it only comes out like 2.5, 3 quarts or something out of most of them. But now it's too late. You change it now, it may start slipping. If it's working fine now, leave it alone. Now, if it starts slipping a little, you might as well try changing it. It might help it a little. But if you change it all and put new fluid in now, the new fluid is slipperier, and it could make the gears slip because they're used to the old dirty fluid that has more friction, and ultimately your transmission, being an automatic, works by fluid friction. Dirty fluid has more friction, and you put in new fluid on a vehicle that's never had it changed, it could start slipping. I wouldn't chance it. Musmac says, I have white smoke coming from my AC air vent. Today I noticed white smoke coming from my vent in my Elantra where the AC's on cooling. The air conditioning is cold. What do you think it could be? All right, well, if it's a refrigerant leak, it won't be cold for very long. It'll all leak out. Refrigerant is invisible. You won't see anything coming out. You got white smoke. It is probably water vapor from frozen evaporator. When your evaporator freezes, that's water vapor coming out. When you see ice and you blow air on it, you get white smoke, right? Now, if that's the case, that means that your expansion valve is kind of sticking inside your dash and it lets it get too cold, or the little warning switch that doesn't let them get below like 38 degrees so they can't get below 32 and freeze. That's bad. You got to take the whole dash apart to replace it. It's a pain in the butt. But I got a simple fix, and I did it for years in a Toyota Camry station wagon we had in Houston. When you run the AC, only run it on full blast, outside air, not recirculated. The hot air outside with full blast will not allow it to freeze because the outside air is too hot. But let's say you put it on recirculate and you put it on the low fan setting, the inside air can get so cold that when that little switch doesn't work and shut the compressor off, the compressor will run and it will actually freeze your evaporator, ice, and then you'll get white stuff coming out. That's probably what it is. Like I said, just put the fan on full blast, outside air, and then generally you're not going to have any problems with it freezing up because the outside air is so hot, it can't freeze the evaporator. The hot air would hit it and the ice would melt. So you wouldn't have to worry about it. If you use recirculate in really low setting, they can freeze up. TMH says, should I buy a Dodge or Ram truck? I'm not a big fan of a lot of the modern Dodge and Ram stuff, but they do make some good ones if you do your homework. For example, Today, a guy brought me a Dodge Ram with a Hemi V8 with a 2500. 8-speed transmission. We pulled a giant RV behind it. You couldn't even tell you were pulling it. But you got to do your research because some of their engines are crap. The smaller ones, a lot of them, they're crap engines, crap transmissions. So you really got to do your research if you're going to buy one. What engine and transmissions are good, and then go from there. Just don't think the name. The name doesn't mean anything. It's what's in it. And so let's say you wanted a diesel. With a Cummins diesel, those are excellent. But the other ones, not so much. So you got to do a lot of research if you're going to buy one of those. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.